Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar presentation titled Visa Bulletin Outlook 2025-2026. Our presentation today is intended primarily to provide up-to-date usable information to U.S. healthcare employers who are either currently engaged in international recruitment as part of their overall strategy, or for those that are considering adding international recruitment to their overall plans. I'm very pleased and excited this morning to be joined by Mike Hammond. Mike is not only a good friend, Mike is one of the leading healthcare immigration attorneys in the country. I've worked together with Mike for many years, and I think he would admit to the same. And as always, it's great to be able to share this time with Mike. Mike, hello. How are things?
Good, Ron. Thank you. I think when you say many years, it makes us seem like we're older than we look. So,
well, thank goodness for photo banks and pictures that aren't updated in real time.
Exactly.
Well, very good. As indicated, we have a really information-filled session today. But just before we jump in, a couple of things just that I'd like to bring to everyone's attention. We certainly welcome your questions today. All questions are welcome, and would ask that you simply use the chat section of your screen to submit those questions, and at the conclusion of our presentation, we'll certainly take the time and answer as many of those questions as we can. So please do that. And also, a recording of this presentation will be available about 24 hours from now on the WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions YouTube channel. You can feel free to go there at any time and review any of the discussion from today. You can also share a link from this presentation or to this presentation with any of your colleagues that you think may be interested or may benefit from the discussion today. So with that being said, we're going to jump right in. And if we could go to our next slide, please. So when we talk about Visa Bulletin processing times, essentially the question is, how long does it take for a visa application from start to finish? I think it's important just that we establish some fundamental basics just to ensure that we're grounded before we get deeper into the conversation. And Visa bulletins processing times are ultimately driven by a candidate's visa priority date. So, Mike, as we jump in this morning, would you just share with our guests how priority dates are actually determined?
Sure. So, for registered nurses, the priority date is determined based upon when they file their I-140, which is the first stage in the green card process. So basically, it's their file date. For allied healthcare workers, anyone who's not an RN or a PT, their priority date is determined at the first stage of their process, which is something called labor certification or PERM. And think of a priority date as simply a spot in the queue. It's your spot in the line. It's like you're going to a deli on a Saturday morning and you pull off number 73 and they call 22. 73 is your priority date. It is your spot in the queue.
Right. So really, really important, because this is really where the timeline begins. And so I love that analogy of the deli, standing at the deli counter, pulling your tab and establishing your place in line. So, okay, all right, great. So next slide, please. So The chart that we show here, if you've been on any of our previous webinars, you'll know that we've taken a real liking to sharing this chart, which indicates what the EB3 or the registered nurse permanent resident processing times have been going back all the way to 2018. It's kind of on the left-hand portion of this graph. The bars are represented in quarterly increments, and further to the right, they're in monthly increments. Mike, can you just share what your interpretation of processing times are and why we've seen, this type of variability that we see here portrayed in this chart?
Sure. So let's start with the idea that we have a base number of 140,000 green cards or immigrant visas that are given out each year. Now, that number varies. It never goes below 140, but it varies based upon spillover from other categories, unused, family, etc. So, for example, this year, as part of the September Visa Bulletin, they came out with their number that this year, instead of 140,000, we actually had 150,000 and 37. Last fiscal year, we were at 160,000. But if you look at the graph that Ron has up here, and we're looking during a period of 2020, 2021, 2022, 23, what was going on worldwide during that time frame? It was COVID. And during COVID, U.S. consulates closed. The majority of family-based immigration comes through U.S. consulates. So since the U.S. consulates were closed, family visas were not being used. So as a result of them not being used, they would spill over to the employment-based category. And if you recall, during that time frame, there were all kinds of exceptions for healthcare workers, direct patient care, who could go into the consulates and get an immigrant visa issued. So keep in mind the number I just gave you earlier. For this fiscal year, we had 150,037. If we go back to fiscal year 2021, we had 262,000 visas available for us in this category, in the entire employment base. We had 281,000 in fiscal year 2022. So all of a sudden, we had a whole lot more visas available than could be used, which made the priority dates essentially current, which created a processing time of about a year, which is not really waiting for the priority date to be current. It's just processing time. It's going through the 40, going through the MVC, et cetera. So this blip has nothing to do with the supply and demand of nurses or anything to go on with the legality of how the nurse process works. It's simply a function. We got dumped a lot of family-based visas into the employment-based category during that period of time. And to some degree, we're now back to normal. We're back to where we were historically.
Right. I think, Mike, one thing that stands out to me from this chart as I reflect on kind of the data here is if we look back to Q3 of 2023 and Q3 of 2024, these are really these two larger spikes that we see here in the center right of the chart. Right. And that's really not that unexpected, as calendar Q3 represents the end of the government fiscal year. And by that time, the visa allotment is usually fully allocated. What's interesting to me is this year in Q3 of 2025, while we're seeing priority dates backed up about 27 months or so, we haven't seen this spike up that we've seen in Q3 the previous 2 years. Any thoughts on that phenomenon, Mike?
Well, this is a pure speculation, but what we know from what they've announced in the Visa Bulletin is that they have almost exhausted all of the visas. And we may see a complete stop come even as early as this month, the rest of August, but certainly in September, we're going to completely run out, which traditionally would mean that they would have retrogressed the dates for the September bulletin, or would have even put a U in there, which stands for unavailable, which would then probably make this chart look a little bit like it has the last 2 years. And I think they've simply decided that that wasn't terribly practical, that it maybe psychologically created all these problems and all these issues. So I think the effect is still the same. We're not going to see a lot of visas issued in September. So we may not see it on a chart, but the reality is we're not going to see them issued. So I think the effect's the same.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we'll take the chart looking the way that it does, and we'll go with that. Mike, on the right-hand side here, we show just a little table summarizing a portion of the September Visa Bulletin. And within the EB3 category, we now see some, and we've seen this for some time, right? A divergence between EB3 skilled and the other workers category. Can you maybe just comment briefly on why these two priority dates are different?
Yeah, so the EB3 visa category is actually made up of three subclasses. There's something called professional, something called skilled worker, and something called other workers. For healthcare workers, a med tech, for example, would be under the professional category, an RN would be under the skilled, and a CNA would be under the other worker category, generally speaking. There is a limit on how many can be put under the other worker category. Historically, not a lot of other workers have been processed because it's expensive to do and the lines were really long. However, maybe about 6-7 years ago, certain industries started sponsoring people for other workers because they could do them in groups, and including yours, CNAs is a prime example that were being processed in large numbers by a lot. But the other worker category is going to continue to stay separated, continue to be long, and is not going to move at the same pace. And I think that'll happen until we absorb or until a lot of people drop out of that category. So it's not a terribly feasible. If you were looking at it today and saying, hey, do I want to start a CNA a recruitment program, you're probably looking at 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and you're probably going, yeah, that's going to be too long.
Yeah. I think that's a great observation, Mike. The extended time, and using the example of CNA or nursing assistant or personal care technician, the demand in those types of occupations is very high. But just given the current processing times, it's just the timeline just isn't feasible. I think we're going to see some forward movement just as the result of dropouts, as many people have already been waiting, right, for 3 or 4 years. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. But unfortunately, that processing time makes it very, very difficult, impractical, really, for some of the other occupational groups like nursing assistant that are also in huge demand across the country. Next slide, please. So, Mike, we've recently received the September 2025 Visa Bulletin. I know we touched on this just briefly. We're anxiously awaiting the October Bulletin, which is the first one in the new fiscal year. But just staying with the September Bulletin for a few minutes, what is the September Visa Bulletin telling us? And is it giving us any indication as to what might be expected in the upcoming fiscal year?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing that I read in the September Bulletin is not either of the two charts, but is there's a little paragraph on page 8 of the bulletin. And the bulletin's publicly available. You can subscribe to it. It's posted everywhere. You can also get it sent to your email as well. It's free from the Department of State. And it simply talks about that we expect to reach the limits in most employment-based categories during August and September. So on one hand, if you're someone who is waiting for an interview in September, you're likely going to be disappointed because you're not likely get a visa issued. You may still have your interview depending on the consulate, or if you're here in the U.S. In the U.S., you go to an adjustment interview, but you probably won't actually get your visa issued or your green card issued until October when the new bulletin comes out. However, that's the effect on the individuals. What I think to all of us on this call today who are looking at this kind of holistically is that this is really good news. This means that the system is working efficiently. So we have a situation where our laws are set up so that we have a use it or lose it system. So if they allocate 140,000 visas in a year and come to the end of September, they've only given out 120,000. That means we had 20,000 lost, 20,000 healthcare workers that, or any type of worker that couldn't come in. Now, were they your workers? I don't know, maybe not. But the bottom line is there were 20,000 less than could have come in. So anytime the government says we've used all 140,000 or we got close, we all have to look at that and go, this is great. And to put that in perspective a little bit, I mentioned earlier that back in fiscal year 2021, we ended up with 262,000 allocated. We only used 195,000 that year. So we were 70,000 visas, 70,000 workers that got completely wasted. Spread that, move forward a couple years to fiscal year 2023, where we had 197,000 allocated and we used 192,000. So basically, it's still a little bit of waste, but not much. It's probably as close as they can get. So I think what the big thing of September Visa Bulletin is that we were an efficient system during this last fiscal year, and they're going to use up virtually all of them for this year. So I view that as a positive thing.
Okay. Great. Mike, does the September Visa Bulletin give us any hint, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but does the September Bulletin give us any hint for the year ahead?
I mean, I think we read into it all kinds of things that were like, the date for filing charts, we moved up in July and it held true. And we can read into positive things if we want to read into positive things. I don't think there's any huge hints that we can really rely on other than our own preconceived notions that make us seem more positive than maybe the reality. But I like that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, me too. Next slide, please. So speaking of outlook, setting aside the September Bulletin, just from maybe looking back at history the last couple of years, any current insights into the system, what Mike, do you think is likely to happen, in this next quarter, October to December 2025, as subsequent visa bulletins come out?
Yeah, so one of the things I think is kind of important is to understand the interaction between the two bulletins. So we get what's called the final action date chart, and we get the date for filing chart. And if you're in the US, the date for filing chart means more to you. If you are overseas, the final action date means more to you. But I think from our perspective, from holistically, we want to look and want to say that the date for filing chart is generally viewed as a kind of projection as to what they think the final action date chart will gain during the course of the year. So when we look at it and we say, let's take the date for filing, that's our goal. That's what we'd like to be to by the end of the year. And the final action date chart is kind of moving, progressing as we get toward that goal. So if we go back and we look at October 2024, which was our last big bulletin, the date for filing chart was set at March 1st, 2023 for both rest of the world and Philippines. And we got to April 1st, 2023 with rest of the world, and we got to February 8th, 2023, which means that last September, when they were sitting in a room looking at all the numbers and they kind of projected where they could get to. They predicted pretty close. They were within a couple of weeks of what they could get to. Now, in July, they even moved the date for filing further up. We moved up to May 2023 in the July bulletin. So I'm expecting that, think of May 2023 as our starting point for October. And if we could get another 3-4 months on a date for filing chart, then I think we could look at that and go, that's where we think we'll get to by the end of this coming fiscal year. I don't think we're going to have huge movement in the final action date chart. Keep in mind, date for filing has already been a couple months ahead. And we are going to have some backlog from September where the visas were probably unavailable. That we're going to have people have interviews or scheduled that they're going to use them up. So I would expect some fairly slow movement during first quarter. But I would look at the date for filing chart as our best predictor.
Okay. Yeah, great insight. I know this is maybe bordering on speculation, but hey, we've got to do that once in a while as well. Do you think, Mike, that we'll get through to the end of 2023 in the next fiscal year?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay. Can you just elaborate just a little bit?
Well, I was having this dream last night, and the dream, some vision came to me and said, we're not going to get through 2023. Yeah, no, obviously anything we do about the visa bulletin is pure speculation for a variety of reasons. Even the government is speculating. For example, let me give you a specific example. Let's say you've got a situation where you've sponsored an RN and her spouse is also an RN, and that spouse has also been sponsored, and they've got 2 kids. Okay, we all know on this call that's 4 people. In the world of immigration, that's 8 people, because it's her application, he's attached to hers, 2 kids, same for them. So we got 8. You've got individuals who are both in the NVC list and in the adjustment of status list for varieties of strategic reasons. You've got people who've changed employers, and so they've got an EB3 approved for company A, and now company A dropped them, but they don't remove them from that list until after their MVC case has been dead for over a year. And even then, sometimes they still don't. Now they've been petitioned by a new employer, so now we have another person counted. So there's a lot of multiple calculations. And in other types of workers, IT workers, for example, which make up a large population in this group, we have people who are in multiple categories, both EB2 category and EB3. So the reality is the government itself has a hard time coming up with a really good number, okay? And that's just the reality. It's been that way forever.
Okay.
So I think that just the way they've done it historically over the last couple of years is they've moved slowly. They want to make sure they can use as many as they can. They want to make sure there isn't a bunch of 45s filed that they can't process. They want to make sure there's not a lot of people sitting at the console, can't get an interview, therefore can't come in, and those are wasted. So I think we're going to still continue to see some conservative movement. Now, the economy could certainly affect this, because we could see a downturn in some hiring in other fields. Particularly the IT space, we could see a downturn. It's flat and has been for about the last 12 months. Maybe it's going to continue to be flat in the IT space. And if so, that would potentially provide some relief to the healthcare space.
Okay. So I think the takeaway here, aside from you and I speculating, is watch for the October Visa Bulletin and pay some particular attention to the date for filing, to give us some indication for what lies ahead in the next year.
Yeah.
All right. Next slide, please. So, Mike, we've been talking about, our beloved EB3 system, such as it is. There's always conversation. There's been conversation for, as long as I can remember about potential regulatory or legislative reforms, having a positive impact on processing times and processing volumes. Anything that's on your radar in this sort of under this category of regulatory legislative reforms, anything that you think might come to the fore here in the upcoming fiscal year?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that the foremost expert on the regulatory and legislative reforms is my friend and Ron's friend as well, an attorney named Chris Masillo, and he does a great blog this regularly. So if you are looking for the latest on regulatory and legislative reforms, check out Chris's blog, and I know Ron posts a bunch of stuff on his WorldWide Health as well. But I am someone who has been optimistic in the past a variety of times and have been sorely disappointed.
Whoops! It looks like we've lost Mike. Hopefully, Mike's back.
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah.
No,
so carry on.
Yeah, I think under this political climate, with Stephen Miller having a significant amount of control in the White House and then as a result over Congress, I find it difficult to believe that we will have any meaningful legislative or regulatory reform in this particular space that we would view as positive. There's a lot of legislative things out there, regulatory things out there that we would all view as very negative. Attacks on the OPT program for students, limiting of international students coming into the U.S., changing the H-1B program to favor higher paid individuals, which will be a positive for the IT industry, not so much the healthcare or research industry. So I think there's a lot of negative things out there on the horizon. I honestly don't see anything positive happening.
Okay. Fair enough. I'll kind of share a thought or two from the other side of that coin. Again, regulatory legislative reforms. We've been talking about that, Mike. I remember having a very deep conversation about legislative reform that was about to pass the finish line when George Bush was president. So it's been a minute, right?
Yep.
But I think Mike raises some valid concerns. I think on the other side of that coin, a couple things that come to my mind is I think the issue of healthcare workforce shortage is probably enjoys a greater sense of awareness amongst the American population generally than it has at any time in the past. I think COVID, really got that conversation started in the public domain. There certainly is a lot of effort and energy being put into various enforcement actions and actions that are impacting, as Mike said, students, individuals that are here on various others, temporary visas, temporary protected status, and more. But given that there is this heightened awareness of the need for healthcare workers, and there is certainly a very significant focus, even in the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, on the challenges in rural healthcare in America, and very significant resources being devoted to that. Without this is not a political statement in any way. The fact that one political party currently, controls all three branches of government may make it somewhat more possible for something to get done, where in the past our elected officials, couldn't agree on what day of the week it was. So just another perspective. Time will tell, right? Time will tell. But also hope springs eternal. And sooner or later, the reality facing healthcare providers is going to get to a point where some action of some sort is going to be forthcoming. So we'll see what the next months and the next year hold in this regard. Next slide, please. So, I think as we talk about sort of the technical part and the mechanical parts of the immigration system, the visa bulletin, how things work, I think it's also really important that we continue to remain grounded in our understanding that the U.S. nursing shortage is a structural problem. It's not a situational problem. And Mike, I don't know what you're hearing from your clients. We're hearing, from some of the clients that we have, some of the clients we share with you, that I would summarize their assessment of the current situation as being less worse, right? It's less worse than it was coming out of the pandemic in terms of vacancy. Overall, RN vacancy rates are lower than they were. In many parts of the country, vacancy rates still exceed 15%. I think a really, really big consideration, we hear this a lot, that employers are seeing retirements increasing, and that's going to accelerate here in the next little while. More new grads than ever before. That's great. But these new grads are also coming into the workforce requiring many supplemental supports. Turnover rate remains very high amongst new graduates, particularly in the first 2 years. It's astonishing to think that someone completes a 4-year bachelor's degree and about 30% make the decision to change careers within the first 2 years of being in the workforce. And then, as I've mentioned, our discussions with providers in rural areas, they face additional unique challenges. Mike, as you interact with healthcare providers, on a regular basis, what sort of feedback are you hearing from them in terms of their assessment of how they're seeing the workforce?
Yeah, I think what's very interesting from my perspective, and I represent both staffing companies and suppliers as well as hospitals independently, but I haven't yet had a hospital say that the length of time it's taking to get a green card for an RN and bring them in is a major factor in a hiring decision. I've heard things like exactly what you said, that the vacancy is not quite as bad as it was a year ago. I've heard significant fears over the unknown of Medicaid, Medicare reimbursement changes and reductions that are going to potentially affect them. So forces that are outside of this scope of this call, and certainly my knowledge, seem to be significantly higher. If we're making a list of reasons not to pursue an international RN, the length of time it's taking is pretty far down the list compared to other factors. Yeah. And so I think that a lot of those other factors are things that are just going to get taken care of as time goes on. We're going to have a better understanding of what the Medicaid, Medicare reimbursement changes are and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think that's spot on with what we're hearing. And I think, Mike, what you've just said is really supporting this conclusion that the nursing shortage is a structural problem, right? Not a situational problem. It's not something that just arose and maybe, with a good strategy is going to be taken care of 6 or 12 months from now. And I think it really boils down to, something we've talked about before, is the fact that the recruiting challenges, the shortage challenges, particularly in the area of nursing, we describe them really as not being a recruitment problem, rather being a supply and demand problem. And in our view, those are two completely different things. And international recruitment in all of its forms continues to be one of the very few levers that U.S. healthcare employers have to add to the absolute supply, as opposed to various strategies that just are focused on redistributing the supply. So I think that's an important grounding to have on this issue overall. If we can just go to the next slide, please. And yeah, so just as we prepare to close, before we get into our question and answer, Mike, you and I, we've both been doing this work for a while, right? I won't say a long time for fear that it makes us sound older than we actually are, but we've been doing this for a while. And if I've learned anything, and I'll be interested in your take on this, if I've learned anything over the years, it's that the organizations that have been most successful in using international recruitment at various times, when processing times have been very short and when processing times have been extended, is those organizations that have included this as part of their strategy and have really taken a pipeline approach of having a flow of candidates in process, a flow of candidates arriving, while continuing to feed that pipeline based on current information, current hiring needs, organizational objectives, maybe expansion. Mike, just take a minute, and I think our guests would be interested in hearing, your perspective on timeline, the overall duration that this may take, and just the benefits that you see, healthcare systems achieving through the consistent use of an international strategy.
Yeah, no, I think that how you're describing it as a pipeline is exactly correct. My clients that are the happiest with their programs are not the clients that have a big hiring event and hire, 45 RNs and then are waiting for those 45 RNs to arrive. It is clients who consistently put X number of people into the pipeline, let's call it every quarter, which means that then in 2.5, 3 years, depending on wherever we're at, you're going to have X number of people coming out of that pipeline at the end of that time frame. Now, that requires some strategic planning. It requires some flexibility. Not all hospital systems are large enough to possibly do that because it requires capital to continue to put people in the pipeline. It requires potentially some flexibility. Obviously, the more you're able to coordinate within your system among individual hospitals, the better off you are. It requires some breaking down of traditionally how we hire, which is we hire Mary and we're waiting for Mary and she's slotted for that CCU unit, and boy, we're not changing anything about that. The reality is 2.5 years from now, maybe that unit doesn't need Mary. Maybe Mary's better off somewhere else. So it does require a lot of strategic planning, but if we put a certain number of people in every quarter and we have that program, then a certain number of people are going to come out every quarter. And then we're going to have a successful program. So,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Next slide, please. Yeah, and just Mike, this is not maybe directly related to the Visa Bulletin, but I think it is germane to our discussion today. And just kind of to pull in another aspect of the potential benefits that an international program can bring rather. And that is addressing this growing issue that employers are increasingly experiencing. It's this phenomenon being referred to as the experience complexity gap. And we've spoken about this in other presentations. I won't belabor it today. It just describes this phenomenon that's gaining momentum where as nurses are leaving, primarily tenured nurses with 20 and 25 years of experience, increasingly and consistently, they're being replaced by nurses that are very much more at the front end of their career, far more novice than the nurse that they're replacing. And when you have someone with 20 years or 25 years experience leaving, being replaced by someone that is maybe 2 years, 3 years, maybe even a new grad, you've essentially just had 20 years of experience walk out the door. And when that happens one time, okay, that's fine. But when it happens 10 times, now it's starting to make a difference. And when it happens 100 times or 200 times within your organization, you start to have this significant degradation in the total combined years of experience that you have in your workforce. And what we find, Mike, is the international nurse, the typical international nurse arriving in the US is arriving with anywhere from 5 to 10 years of nursing experience. So in this context, it's not just that there's another nurse, another pair of hands to do the work, but they're also bringing very valuable experience with them at a time where it's increasingly needed. Interested, Mike, if you're kind of seeing or hearing the same thing, and what your observation would be on the typical nurse that arrives and their background and their experience level.
Yeah, I can certainly say that one of the things that has changed in the last, even let's go back 10 years, and certainly we go back before that, is that we see a lot more international nurses that are coming into the US who have experience other than just in the Philippines. They are going to the Middle East and spending a couple years working. They're going to Europe, Ireland, UK, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, before they come in. And one of the things that I know that a lot of individuals are doing is, if I've got a retrogression of, say, 2.5 years, it's not problematic to take a 2-year assignment in Dubai. I'm not affecting my US immigration case whatsoever. I'm going to be fine. The timing's going to fit perfect. And I'm going to have a greater experience by the time I get here. We're talking about experience gained from the date of hire until the date of arrival. And that's really, really critical all of a sudden. And that is something that has changed significantly. I see a much higher percentage of RNs than I did before.
Yeah, also very true. And that has, very significant and positive implications when that nurse then makes a further relocation here to the US. So yeah, great insight, and thanks for sharing that. If we could get on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so just carrying this thought on further, won't spend a lot of time here, but just how it is that the international nurse helps to bridge this gap. If we could go to the next slide, please. All right, and with that, I'll ask my colleague Sydney to rejoin us. Sydney's been helping keep an eye on the chat section throughout the presentation today. So Sydney, if any questions have come in, we'd be happy to take them now.
I don't currently see some questions. We have some people joining us from Brazil, but I do not currently see any further questions. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll get them answered.
Okay. Well, with that, Mike, I'll just turn it back over to you for a minute with any sort of closing thoughts or other insights that you may want to share, in this overall context of not just Visa Bulletin, but processing times, and how to how to get the most out of an international recruitment program.
Sure. So one of the things that I say to if we're talking to candidates all the time, is the message to candidates is don't look at how long the bulletin is today. Get in the queue, get your priority date established. And if I'm talking to employers, I'm talking about let's step back and let's look strategically. Let's look at how can we make this work on a long-term basis. And oftentimes that's a mix of candidates, a mix of a pipeline. Maybe it's looking at other visa options. There's a variety of things, but let's look strategically and let's make sure we're examining our program, not just on what's going on today and looking at today's bulletin, but also just kind of long term and being realistic about what the reality is about how long something's going to take and how we can use that to our advantage to get workers better trained. So.
Yeah, I think, Mike, I would just pick up on one of the points that you made there as we wrap up today. You mentioned in speaking to candidates, really from a candidate perspective, it's the question isn't the processing time. The question is how soon can you get your place in that line, right? And that requires passing the NCLEX exam and having a certain level of experience and other things. But I think as we think about this question of how do we get nurses to the U.S. in the shortest possible time, I think some of that same thinking applies from an employer's perspective as well, right? I agree with everything you said, needing a plan, making sure that plan considers all the opportunities. But the answer to the question of how do we get our nurses here in the shortest possible time, I believe an important part of the answer to that question is getting started, right? Just getting started, getting petitions in queue, and the process, while that petition is in queue, the processing times may become shorter, they may become extended, they may stay the same. But until a petition is in the queue, processing times are infinite, right? It's never going to happen. So just another take on keeping the processing times in the right context. And in saying all of that, I want to be very careful not to come across as being dismissive in any way. I understand that for employers and clients that have needs today, talking about 18, 24, 28 months from now may not be exactly the response you're wanting to hear. So we recognize that there certainly are urgent needs today, but there's also these systemic needs that are going to continue to exist into the long foreseeable future. And that's where international continues to make a contribution. Mike, thanks as always. It's been a great conversation, great discussion. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, I would simply remind you that a recording of this presentation will be available within the next day on the WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions YouTube channel. Also encourage you to stay connected through our various social media channels to keep updated on upcoming webinar presentations. We try to do several of these each month on a wide variety of topics, whether it's immigration, whether it's best onboarding practices, whether it's clinical roundtables. So please stay connected through our social media channels. We'd love to welcome you back to a webinar presentation in the near future. In the meantime, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your interest. We welcome any inquiries that you might have. Thank you again. Bye for now.